What is up, cheeseheads? Welcome back to another episode of BAM GPG. So, Bryson, we got some interesting news from the Green Bay Packers over the past couple days here. And quite honestly, it's been a little bit chaotic, right? With keeping up on some of it here. And today we're going to talk about the two biggest stories over the last couple days for the Green Bay Packers. First of all, we're going to get into the Rashan Gary drama, right? Had some Packer fans, ecstatic over the first few hours of the news of what looked like a goodbye message to the Green Bay Packers. And then second, we're going to get into the trade that happened here with the Indianapolis Colts and the Green Bay Packers, bringing in linebacker Zaire Franklin. So both moves, they certainly signal some pretty big changes coming to the Packers defense. We're going to go ahead and get into that for this episode here, Bryce.
To that later. Get into that
Yeah,
later.
for sure. So let's start with Rashan Gary and the social media drama. Came out a couple days ago here, Bryson. So this one, again, had everyone across the internet, if you're a Packers fan, kind of going crazy a little bit, right? So a couple days ago, Gary posted a message on his Instagram, basically of what looked like a farewell to the Green Bay Packers. He was thanking the organization and kind of thanking the fans as well, right? And talking about a new chapter from moving on from Green Bay, essentially, right? That came to an end in Green Bay, talking about a new chapter wherever he does land, right? So obviously, you know, Packer fans, some of us rejoice, like Bryson and I, just based off of his play on the field. How could you not? But you know, this is interesting, right? So immediately after posting that, just minutes after posting that, he did delete it. So it was not confirmed that Rashan Gary has been traded or that the Packers were moving on from him, but certainly doesn't close the door on that. Right, Bryson.
Yeah.
So after it got completely gone, wiped from his Instagram, the explanation that came out of Gary's party there said that he had been hacked. Now, listen, maybe that's true, right? But let's just say most Packer fans across the internet weren't buying that explanation from
Yeah.
Gary and his side.
If there was a hacker, why would he just post one post and then give the account back to him?
Exactly. If his account was hacked, the odds of somebody just posting that one farewell post and then hopping out of his account so he could regain access without doing any other damage to it, very unlikely, right?
Yeah.
So again, I think most Packer fans are not buying into this because again, you see a farewell message that detailed and then it just disappears out of nowhere. It usually means that there is something going on behind the scenes there with him and the Green Bay Packers. And that's just where the story starts to get interesting for Packer fans, right? So you look at Rashan Gary, right? He's on a 4-year, $96 million contract extension that he signed back in 2023. Packers, if they do move on from him, they would save, roughly 10 to 11 million dollars in cap space this offseason. Now you look at the Packers roster, Bryson, the money they're already committed, right? To players like Jordan Love, to players like Micah Parsons. Every dollar of this cap space, it's going to matter this offseason if they're going to fill some of these key roles. And that's why some people think that the Packers may be quietly testing the trade market for Rashan Gary. I know Gutekunst came out a week or two ago saying that he is in the plans. I don't buy that one bit. I think Green Bay will move on from Rashan Gary, but you take a look at Rashan Gary's production. He's been a really good player historically for Green Bay, but over the past couple seasons, you know, he's getting paid elite money for a player that's not getting double digits in the sack category, right? Now, over the past couple seasons, he's had about 7.5 sacks over each season. And typically, that's solid numbers, right? But not for a player that is being paid his salary, right? He's being
That's
paid elite salary. Yeah. So again, if you're the
maybe
but it's still in that elite category. And if you're the Packers, you have to take a deep look. Are you happy with the production for what the price tag is on Rashan
I
Gary?
I would say no if I was the Packers.
Absolutely. That money that you are paying Rashan Gary, that could be allocated somewhere else on this roster to fill some of the holes that are needed. Now, let's be clear. The Packers, they have not traded Rashan Gary. They have not released Rashan Gary. He is still on the roster today. But situations like this, they sometimes it means that something is brewing behind the scenes,
I
right?
think I think he's either getting a salary cut or he's getting cut to free
Absolutely.
agency.
There's been talks, something like this. It could be maybe his agents testing the waters a little bit, right? Maybe Gary himself has heard something behind closed doors, or maybe it's just kind of a weird social media mistake on Gary's end, which all three are possible. But either way, it definitely raised some eyebrows around the league when he did post that. So let's get into this trade, Bryson. We talked about this with the Colts. The Packers did make a trade with them. They traded defensive tackle Colby Wooden for linebacker Zaire Franklin. Okay. And this is actually a pretty interesting move for the Green Bay Packers. If
Yeah.
you're familiar with Zaire Franklin at all, he's been one of the most productive linebackers, not just on the Colts, but in the NFL. 2024, he had a little bit of down year in 2025. 2024, he did lead the entire league in tackles at
He's
173.
he's a tackle machine.
He is. Those are just insane numbers, right? Now, as I mentioned last season, down a little bit, had about 120 tackles last season, couple sacks, and a forced fumble. Throughout his career, he is a seventh round pick, I think, Bryson. We looked that up earlier. This guy's known for his high motor, right? He's a high IQ linebacker who plays extremely physical, right? Now, from a talent standpoint, the Packers, they're getting a really solid defensive player out of
And I
him.
think this means Quay Walker is probably going into free agency.
Yeah, absolutely. So that would be the bigger question for the Green Bay Packers of why they made this move. And as you mentioned, Bryson, the answer is they're probably moving on from Quay Walker. Walker, he's approaching going into free agency. He's going to command a pretty big contract on the open market. I would imagine somewhere around the 15 million per year salary is what I'm kind of picturing for him. And that's a lot of money to allocate to one player, right?
Yeah, we just do not have. We're trying to save every penny we can. We cannot afford that.
Yeah. So to me, this is the Packers kind of preparing for the possibility and likelihood that they are going to be moving on from Quay Walker in free agency. And if that happens, Zaire Franklin, I would expect him to step in right away into that starting Mike linebacker position for this Green Bay Packers defense. So now a little bit, they did have to give up Colby Wooden, which to the Colts, which really kind of further hampers our issue at interior defensive line, right? That was one of the position groups going into the offseason that we highlighted that we need to improve this offseason. Because honestly, I mean, we got Wyatt, right? Wyatt's going to be coming back off that injury. That's great, but you're going to have to add depth. You're going to have to get some big bodies in there who can stop the run as well. So certainly, Colby Wooden, was he that guy? He probably wasn't the biggest body that you would want to put in there,
He
wasn't the greatest run stopper per se.
kinda,
Yes. So
but we would have needed a little bit more.
absolutely. So you moved on from him in that trade. So Green Bay is certainly going to have to address this position. I think they'll attack it in the draft. Maybe there's a guy they can find in free agency. We'll dig into more of that here, Bryson, see who is available. But there are some positions in need that Green Bay, they're going to have to attack this offseason. Cornerback, interior defensive line, and that offensive line as well. Now, strictly looking at the defensive side of the ball, Bryson, this trade, these two stories, you talk about Rashan Gary, you talk about Colby Wooden leaving, you're getting Franklin back in there at the linebacker for Quay Walker. It becomes pretty clear that there is going to be kind of a change, a different look to this Green Bay Packers defense going into the 2026 NFL season. And remind you, we do have a new defensive coordinator. So, yeah, I'm sure he has a vision of what he wants out on the field there, and he's going to fill it with players that kind of fit his vision for that
Yeah.
defense. So it'll be interesting to see what Green Bay continues to do this offseason. Yep, for sure. For sure. And that offensive line, right? We saw just a rotating door of offensive line
Yes.
throughout the season, and it really hurt, right? You saw it early in the season, especially, right? Zach Tom wasn't able to get in there. Jenkins got hurt. You just saw a rotating door in there, right? So,
Yeah.
Aaron Banks is another guy who couldn't stay healthy, stay out on the field. You're going to have to add some depth because, again, offensive line is a position where you're going to see nicks and dings throughout the season. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be guys that are going to need a week or two off. It's just nature of the business at that position, right? So you have to have solid depth at that position. And I think you're going to have to add some true solidified starters to some of those positions too.
Honestly, I feel like injuries was the reason why we did not compete for the Super Bowl last year.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We were 9-3-1, and then we had a bunch of injuries right after that.
And it's crazy. Bryson said this the other day, and it made you kind of step back and be like, wow, I didn't realize that. But the Packers, they did not win a single football game after Micah Parsons went down with that injury in Denver. That to me is interesting, right? You like to think Green Bay is a solid team, but when you lose a key player or two, you have to have solid depth that can step in
Yeah.
and keep the ship afloat until they can get back, right? Obviously, you couldn't do that with Parsons because of the ACL, but you need to add some depth at some of these positions for sure. So,
Yeah.
Bryson, we will be back. We'll get into some more of the mock drafts and start to take a deeper dive into this year's free agency pool to see who's out there. Again, cornerback, defensive line, our interior defensive line, and the offensive line are Green Bay's areas of interest going into the offseason. So we'll be back with more, Bryson. And as always,
Let's go, Pat, go.